I'm Dan Keene. Welcome to Board Challenge. In this first of the Board Challenge series of board development workshops, I want to challenge you to evaluate the way your board operates. Are you running at top speed, or like so many boards, simply idling along? Let's walk through a series of key questions about how your board operates, and I'll give you some ideas about how you can bring your board up to top speed. All you have to do is answer yes, no, or gray area as I ask these questions. Then be ready to discuss your answers with the rest of your board as you move through the tape or after you've completed watching the entire tape. If we hit an area you think your board really needs to discuss, simply stop the tape, tackle the issue head on. Ready? Let's go. First question is a 3-in-1 question. Does your board have a mission statement for the organization? Do you know what the mission statement is? And third, have you reviewed the mission statement in the last year? All members of the board team need to be headed in the same direction. That's what a mission statement is all about. A statement of the purpose of the organization. It represents the commitment of the organization's resources to one purpose. It is a limiter of what your organization will do with the resources it has. The process of developing that mission statement is just as important as the actual product. The struggle to put the purpose of the organization into one sentence will probably require your team to carefully examine what you expect from this organization, and that will be very difficult, and it will certainly take a good deal of time. I suggest that you make development or review of the mission statement the first part of your annual long-range planning retreat, and then build your plan focused on that mission statement. That brings us right to question number 2. Does your board have a long-range plan for the organization? And do you annually review that long-range plan? The most important job the board has is planning the future of the organization. Without a plan, your board cannot do the rest of the job. Board policies are based on the mission and the long-range plan. Priorities for use of your resources are based on the plan. Programs and services grow out of the long-range plan and the mission statement. Staff, management, and board move in the same direction only if you have a plan. Now, you can monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of the organization only if you have goals to measure in the first place. Long-range planning cannot be assigned to staff or management. Staff and management should be a part of the planning team along with board members. Reviewing and updating the long-range plan should be an annual event for your board, for staff and for management as well. Set aside several hours each year in a quiet setting, somewhere away from the office, and focus just on the future of your organization. I also strongly suggest you get an outside facilitator to help you write the plan. An outsider will help you get the tough issues on the table, keep your planning team focused. Question number 3. Do all board members know how your organization differs from a for-profit corporation? First, let me emphasize that you're governing a business, and you should do that in a very business-like manner. There are several very important differences between the nonprofit business that you govern and a for-profit business. The bottom line, for example, of a for-profit is, of course, profit. The bottom line of all nonprofits, however, is service. Your organization was established to provide service to people, to members, constituents, clients, patients, or whatever. That means that all board decisions must focus first on service to people and not on profit or loss. Board members are trustees, elected or appointed, to make sure that the organization provides the very best possible service to the people you're supposed to serve. You should be committed to making that decision, all decisions, based on what's best for the greatest good of those you serve, not on what's best for you personally or what would benefit a special constituency. Question number 4. Do all members of the board understand their legal liabilities for this organization? Very simply put, A governing board is responsible and liable for everything that happens in this organization. Now, I don't consider board liability an overwhelming issue, but remember, this is a business you're governing, and it's just good business to assess the risk and manage the liability. Know your job as a board member. Pay attention. Do the job right. Those are all great suggestions that anyone could give you for avoiding litigation. Ask your board attorney to do a session sometime about managing your risk on this board. If you have a directors and officers liability insurance policy, invite your insurance carrier to a meeting to discuss what your insurance covers and how you can manage your board's risk of liability. Question number 5. Does your board have a rotation policy to limit terms of board members? Now, you want to maintain some experience on the board, of course, but your board team will become very stagnant if you don't continually bring on new people. That means that some board members have to move off the board to make room for the new recruits. The best way to do that is with a board policy that limits terms. I suggest terms of 3 years, with a total length of service of 6 consecutive years. After a board member has been off the board a year, he or she is eligible for service again. Being off the board at least a year allows some new blood to come onto the board every year. Question number 6. Do you have a plan for recruiting high-quality new board members? If you're a public board, put recruiting in quotation marks, but all boards should be in the business of perpetuating the board with the very best people available. No one knows better than the current board who can serve well on your board team. Encourage those good people to be candidates. Now, if you're a self-perpetuating board, recruitment is an ongoing process in which every board member should participate. The nominating committee is the board development committee and facilitates good recruitment. Question number 7. Does your board have a formal plan for orienting new board members to the job? Once you get the good people on the board, you have to help them learn how to do the job and what the organization is all about. Even those who have served on other boards need to learn how this board operates and what this organization does. You cannot afford to have good board members working at half speed because nobody told them what their job is. Board members and the executive should orient board members. Set aside at least an hour soon after you bring new board members on. Focus on explaining these issues, the big issues, the mission and the long-range plan, understanding the budget, financial reports, funding sources, knowing the board's relation to staff, knowing how meetings are conducted, what are the basic policies of this board, who are the people on this board, what do they do, where do they live, and what do all the committees do? Question number 8. Does your board have a plan for ongoing board development? The board member's job is complex and it's always changing. We never get to a point where we know all that there is to know about doing this job well. We have to continually hold in-service training for board members to learn to do their job better. First, budget money for board development. You probably budget board money for staff development, and the board's no less important. With the money you budget, do these things. Purchase board development materials, journals, manuals, books, tapes. Send board members to conferences, conventions, workshops that will help them do their job better. Schedule 15 minutes each meeting for board development activity. Question number 9. Do you have a set of board policies codified and assembled in a manual? Now, most boards have policies, but they're often scattered throughout meeting minutes or just a part of the understood tradition of the way this board operates, and that's not good enough. A board sets parameters for the organization through good policies. Those policies need to be in writing and reviewed at least annually for accuracy. All board members need to know the board's policies. Without a good set of policies, your board is in a very vulnerable position for some kind of litigation. Without a good set of written board policies, you cannot maintain consistency of operation of your board. Don't mistake personnel policies for board policies. Personnel policies are management policy and speak to the manner in which the staff will operate. Board policies speak to the manner in which the board will operate. Question number 10. Do all of your board members understand the difference between management and governance? The single issue that causes more conflict for nonprofit boards than any other issue is that of defining what is a board duty and what is a management duty. The reason for that is the impossibility of clearly defining what the board should do and what they should delegate to management. There are several other ways you can deal with this confusion and keep things in somewhat of a perspective. Here are some ideas. First, this should not be a turf battle between board members and the executive. Board and management must always function as a team. The real issue is allowing each part of the board team to do what they do best without interference from other members of the team. The board sets the broad parameters within which the organization will operate. In other words, the board sets policy. The board never gives up ultimate responsibility for everything in the organization, but the board hires the executive to freely manage the organization within the parameters set by the board. Here are a couple of examples. The board sets the long-range goals for the organization, and the executive sets annual goals that work into the long-range goals. The board approves an amount in the budget for staff salaries, but the executive determines what staff salaries will actually be. The board writes policies for investment of organization funds, but the executive actually manages the finances and the investments within the parameters established by the board. The bottom line of all of this, each member of the board team, management and board members, does what each does best and allows the other members of the board team to do their job without interference. Question 11. Does your board consider the executive an integral part of the board team in all cases? The executive director is the board's best resource. I'm very surprised to occasionally run into a board that meets frequently without their executive. Now, that's a mistake. If the issue is lack of trust between the board and the executive, it is time for your team to talk seriously about how you can rebuild trust. When I serve on a board, I expect the executive to be there with recommendations on every issue and documentation to support those recommendations. Question number 12. Does your board evaluate the executive annually? The board-administrator relationship is an employee-employer relationship. Without a good formal evaluation from the board, the employer, the executive does not have a clear direction of what the board expects. Evaluation is the best possible communication tool between the board and the executive. Board members can tell the executive what they like and what they don't like about his or her performance. The executive can discuss freely with the board how board members can help the executive do a better job. Evaluation even provides a good benchmark for discussing executive compensation. If you don't now evaluate your executive, write a policy that says you will evaluate the executive annually. Then appoint a committee to develop the evaluation process. Be sure to include the executive as one of the committee members. Question 13. Do all members of your board understand their proper relationship with line staff? When you hire an executive director, one of the powers delegated to that position is management of personnel, all personnel. The board should understand that the board only has one employee. Even though the organization may have many employees, the board only has one employee, and that one employee is your executive. Now, the executive may hire other employees, but these employees are directly responsible and accountable to the executive, not to the board. The board should delegate hiring, evaluating, disciplining, termination, all of that, of any of the staff below the executive director, and they should do that without interference from the board. The board connection to staff is simply to assure that the executive director has a good set of personnel policies in place and the staff are being evaluated regularly. Complaints from staff to board members should be referred directly to your executive. Board members should not take complaints to staff except through the executive director. Following a clear line of chain of command is just good business. Question 14. Do all members of the board support decisions by the board, even if they disagree with those decisions? Board members have a very great obligation to advocate an individual point of view. That's why you're elected. But only while the issue is before the full board for complete deliberation. Once the vote is taken on the issue, every board member has an obligation to support the majority decision. It is both unethical and extremely damaging to the team for a board member to publicly criticize a board decision or other members of the board. Question 15. Do all members of the board understand the limits of their power? All power rests with the full board. Individual board members have no power or any authority to act on behalf of the board. The full board may, of course, delegate power to individual board members. For example, even the board chair does not have power as an individual, but the full board may delegate to the board chair the power to speak for the board or sign contracts or meet with individual groups on behalf of the board or whatever. Individual board members may not make demands of a staff or management unless the full board has granted them that power. Individual board members may not speak for the board to the public or to constituents unless the board has granted that power. The bottom line of this one, the board is a team and must exercise authority only as a team. Question 16. Do all board members come to the board meetings fully prepared to do their job? Agenda packets should be sent to all board members several days in advance of the board meeting. The packet should contain the meeting agenda, minutes of the previous meeting, financial reports, committee reports, administrative report, and any other supporting material. Board members should study the materials when it comes to them and be prepared to deal with the issues when they get to the board table. Meetings are not for gathering information or studying the materials or doing research. Meetings are for putting our perspectives about the issues together with the perspectives of other board members and taking action. Studying the materials or listening to reports during the meeting are not a good use, effective use of your meeting time. Failure to prepare for meetings is a sign of disrespect for all the other members of your board team. Question 17. Do your meetings last less than 2 hours? Some meetings will take longer than 2 hours, of course, if the board is involved in a major fundraiser or if you're looking at your budget or whatever. But your general rule of thumb should be less than 2 hours. If your board meetings consistently last more than 2 hours, ask yourself a couple of questions. Are we dealing with management issues that should be left to the executive and staff? Are board members prepared when they get to the table? Could we shorten our meetings by tightening up the agenda and then sticking to the agenda better? Are there particular issues that the board has a hard time understanding, such as the financial report, about which we need more education? Are individual board members causing our meetings to bog down because they dominate discussion and don't stick to the issues? Check it out. Question 18. Do all board members feel free to vote their consciences? Because the board must act like a team does not mean that board members all have to think alike and vote alike. You should feel very free to vote as you believe. There should never be intimidation to vote with the majority. There should never be pressure to vote with the majority because it looks better to the public or to constituents. You should never vote just to keep from offending another board member. Remember, you're voting on issues, not personalities. Final question. Does your board have planned social activities for the board team? To be able to work together as teammates, we have to cultivate the team spirit. I have to know you as a person. What's your family like? What's your occupation? What are your interests? What are your hobbies? Before I can work well with you at the board table. To cultivate the team spirit, plan some occasions when board members can socialize. For example, Schedule coffee and cookies ahead of the regular board meeting when board members can just get together to chat. Meet over a meal once in a while. Go to conferences and conventions together. Plan a board Christmas party. Whatever you do, give board members a chance to relate as people before you have to relate as board members. That's the valuation. How did you do? Spend some time now discussing your responses to the questions and what you can do to improve your board team. Thanks for being a part of this workshop. I hope you'll join me in the other workshops in the Board Challenge series.